Hey guys, how's it going? One of the most common questions that writers get asked is, where do your story ideas come from? Whether it's from other creatives trying to come up with their own ideas or just general curiosity, it's a really fun topic. I'm the kind of person that always has a million story ideas floating around in my head. So today I wanted to share 10 ways that I come up with ideas, methods I use, sources of inspiration, and I have a feeling I'll ramble, so I am going to leave timestamps in the description below, but let's get right into it. Number 10, dreams. Give me a second to get the cliche out of the way first, but I'm also going to expand on this. So many times you hear the writer say that the story came to them in a dream or was inspired by a dream, etc. Dreams can be your imagination just running wild without consciousness or logic getting in the way, and sometimes those wild ideas are super inspiring. A lot of times it's not a full idea or a clear-cut story, but personally I get a lot of horror ideas from nightmares. A lot of weird elements in my stories come from trippy things that happen in dreams. Sometimes it's a vibe or an atmosphere that I can incorporate into a story, stuff like that. So this is a common answer for a reason, but it's not really a helpful one. If you're trying to come up with an idea, it's not really a method to intentionally try or to rely on. And I know that a lot of people also just shrug off this idea immediately because they say that they can't remember their dreams or they don't think that they do dream. But that being said, there are ways to improve your odds. The main one that I recommend is a dreams journal. It can either be a physical notebook that you keep by your bed, or you can use like the Notepad app on your phone, voice memo if that works better for you. Right after you wake up, immediately write down whatever you remember from your dream. It's okay if you don't really remember the dream, just a vague, I was looking for something, or I was in a building, or so-and-so was there. Even just that can be helpful. Even if all you remember is a vague feeling or an emotion right after you wake up, start with that. Nearly everyone dreams. The problem is that the dreams aren't retained by your memory, so they fade almost immediately. If you write down your dreams as soon as you wake up, it can start to train your brain to remember them and hold on to them for a little bit longer, hopefully long enough for you to be aware of them and spend a little bit of time actually thinking of them. After you write them down, you can read them back, you can maybe look them over and see if there are certain elements that could become something, and sometimes certain pieces of a dream will show up again later, and you can kind of add them together and build upon them. And a lot of times these dreams are really loose, really vague. Maybe they don't fully make sense once you're actually awake and thinking about it, but you can still work with it. Sometimes I'll have a nightmare that feels so terrifying in the moment, but once I wake up and actually think about it, it made no sense and it's actually not scary at all. But think of it like a zero draft that you can now revise. I'll pick it apart, I'll tweak it, critique it, like, actually no, that wasn't all that scary. But if this would have happened, this would have been horrifying. And then kind of go from there. Now I still wouldn't recommend relying on dreams to come up with story ideas. Like if you want to write a book, my first suggestion probably wouldn't be go to sleep and hope for the best. But it's still a skill worth developing if you're interested, because dream ideas can be really fun. And it's just too much of a classic to leave off this list. Number 9 is music. Another classic, but at least this one can be a little more intentional. I like to start with a loose vibe of what I want to write, maybe a genre and a rough tone, and then pick some songs or type of song that gives that feeling. I think the most obvious recommendation is love songs for romance, but it could also be like punk or some indie rock for something angsty, something high energy or a good dance beat for like an upbeat adventure. My favorite things to write are fantasy stories with weird vibes, so I like some psychedelic rock, maybe a little synth pop, but really whatever songs give you the rough feeling of what you want to write. If I don't have a starting place or a rough vision yet, I like to just put my music on shuffle and see what happens. Preferably something with lyrics at this stage. Most songs don't tell a complete story because they're only a handful of minutes, so I try to fill in the blanks of the song. If it's a love song and the singer is singing about a lost love, I'll fill in the blanks on what the relationship was like. What's the backstory? Why did they break up? What is the other person feeling? Are they going to get back together? Stuff like that. You can use clues in the lyrics and read between the lines to kind of help develop the story. Folk music is also great for this. There's usually already a lot of storytelling in the song that you can then build upon. Sometimes the story might take on a life of its own and move away completely from whatever the initial inspiration was. It can also be fun to leave Easter eggs or references to whatever the original song was, maybe a rewritten version of a lyric or naming a character after the artist. I just think that's a fun little thing to do. And a single song doesn't have to inspire a full story. Maybe it just inspires a character or like a scene or a key moment, and then you just follow whatever would happen next. You could combine songs, you could use a full album to come together and create a narrative. The song and the lyrics are just the jumping off point to come up with the story you're creating, and then the music itself can be the energy or the rhythm of the story. A fun example would be something like Don't Pay the Ferryman by Burgh. I'll leave it linked down below if you're unfamiliar, but Burgh has a lot of really good storytelling songs. This one is a not so subtle reference to crossing the river Styx, and it's a warning to the character in the song not to pay the ferryman until the journey is complete. It's really fun, it's dramatic, there's like a higher energy tension to it. You can feel the storm brewing while they're on the water, you can sense the character's mood shifting as things are ramping up. It just paints such a vivid picture in my mind. I don't think it's a full-length novel on its own, but it's a fun starting place. Ask questions, flesh it out, play with it. Like, why is the character taking this journey? Is this the beginning or the ending of their final trip? Maybe the character does pay the ferryman early. Maybe the boat capsizes in the storm. Follow the music itself and the feelings to kind of guide the direction, and once you have enough of a sense of what you want to do, take it from there. Number 8 is historical unsolved mysteries. This isn't just a suggestion for mystery novels, although it can be really good for that. There are so many great unexplained things in our world, so why not make up an explanation and turn it into a story? This was inspired by my one-a-day desk calendar. It's a History Channel Unexplained Mysteries, and it's just daily snippets of exactly what it sounds like, unexplained mysteries. Although on the weekend we get we get ones that have been explained, and it's actually kind of fun. Obviously, you don't need this exact desk calendar for this method. There are so many lists and sources online. This is just what I'm having a lot of fun with right now. There's so much variety. Some of them are mysterious shipwrecks, there's ruins that we haven't fully explained yet, weird unsolved crimes, strange disappearances, natural phenomenon that we have no idea why they're happening, stuff like that. Some of them have really piqued my interest, and I've actually saved the pages for future story ideas. There are some that I would really love to research and really dig into and write an entire story based off of that. There's one from a few weeks ago about a woman named Dorothy Eddy, I think is how you pronounce it, E-A-D-Y. She was a British woman born in 1904, and in her early 20s she was in an accident and experienced some head trauma. And after that, her behavior, her speech pattern completely changed. She started insisting that she was a reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian priestess. But she actually went on to become a world-renowned Egyptologist, and she would go into the temples, and even with no light on at all, she could navigate them. She knew where certain things were in the dark before she even stepped into the room. She helped other researchers identify these ancient artifacts, and she was actually right. Maybe it was reincarnation, maybe it was just educated guesswork and a lot of coincidences, but either way, I just thought that was so fascinating. I would love to do more research and write an entire story inspired by that. But you also don't need to take direct inspiration like that. You can just get a hint from something and make the rest up. There was one about a lost sword. It was a Japanese national treasure from the 13th century that was confiscated after World War II along with other sword collections. And there are records of it being taken. They even have this sergeant that was supposed to be transporting it. But it never arrived at the destination, and when they were looking into that sergeant, they realized that nobody by that name ever existed. Now, realistically, it was probably just stolen, and it was an elaborate ruse and a fake name, etc. But your story doesn't have to reflect the real events. You don't have to reference the actual history at all if you don't want to. You could just write about an ancient sword that goes missing under mysterious circumstances and create this elaborate heist. Or maybe the sergeant was a ghost or a time traveler who needed the sword for some fantastical reason. Maybe the sword was magical and refused to be taken by someone who was undeserving, and decades later it's going to reappear and choose someone new to wield it. Maybe the sword was never taken in the first place. Maybe the prince who allegedly surrendered it actually hid it, and he left clues for his descendants on where to find it, and now they're on this magical treasure hunt to find this ancient sword. I could go on and on, but the point is there are so many unexplained mysteries in the world that are really fun to think about. Whether you research an actual event and come up with a plausible explanation, or you hear about weird weather patterns and create an elemental magic system based off of it, the possibilities are endless. Number 7 is your favorite tropes. I feel like write the book you want to read is really cliche advice, but that's basically what I'm recommending here. What are some of your favorite tropes? What do you like about them? What do you wish was done more with them? What other elements would you love to see included? Personally, for this one, I like to brainstorm it from my perspective as a reader, not as a writer. I don't know if it's like this for other people, but I find sometimes when I'm thinking about tropes in my writing, I overthink it, I get critical, I poke so many holes in it that it sinks before it has a chance to become anything. I decide that it's too cliche, other people are doing it better, I can't pull it off for whatever excuse. But as a reader, I don't care if it's been done before. Tropes are tropes for a reason. Who cares if there are a million memory loss mysteries with an unreliable narrator? I love that stuff. It's one of my favorite trope. Give me a million more. You'll end up putting your own spin on it as you write. So for now, just think of it as, what do I want to read? And go from there. What would be my ideal execution of this trope? To use the memory loss trope as an example, I try to think of like, what would I want to see? Maybe there are two characters with memory loss, and you don't know whether one of them is lying and manipulating the other, how they're going to interact, what's going to happen between the two of them. That would be fascinating to read. Or what if it's turned on its head? What if everybody else is experiencing memory loss except for the main character? Somehow they're the only one that's remembering something, or the only one that really knows what's going on. That can be an unreliable narrator in its own right, because are they really the only one that's remembering this thing and everybody else is wrong, or are they gaslighting everybody? That's just a few ideas off the top of my head, but you get the idea. You could also combine your favorite tropes, even if at first glance they don't seem like they necessarily go with each other, or pick a trope that you enjoy in theory, but you rarely enjoy the execution of it. I'm not a romance reader, but I really like the idea of the forced proximity trope and secretly dating. I just don't usually like the execution because I don't enjoy everything else that goes into a romance novel all that often. So what if I take it out of the context that I don't normally enjoy and put it in with something I do like? So maybe it's a thriller and there was a character with memory loss after a mysterious accident. Maybe the main character was part of a secret agency and they know international secrets. So they're partnered up with another agent who turns out to be the love interest while they recover so they don't, slip up and spill all of these really important secrets. And maybe they had tried dating prior to the accident, but it didn't work out and it ended really awkwardly. And they hadn't wanted to tell anybody that they were dating because, they're secret agent co-workers and, gotta keep it under wraps. And the main character doesn't remember the love interest at all. And the love interest can't refuse the assignment because then they have to reveal that they had been dating this person. And there can be flirty banter that the love interest is trying to keep a lid on because they know that they're not compatible. But they're also, taking care of their ex and feelings are developing. That's a lot of the romance things that I do like. Maybe the love interest trying to keep the secret of their previous relationship is making the main character aware that something is up that they're hiding, and the more they learn about this conspiracy, the more they wonder if the love interest is in on it. And the crux of the story is still this mysterious accident and this corrupt secret agency. That way it doesn't veer too far into the romance territory that I personally just don't really care for, but I still get to incorporate elements of these tropes that I am curious about and do want to play with. I don't even know if that example would work, but it's fun to brainstorm, and that's half the point. Coming up with the idea as a reader, and then once you get excited about it, once you've kind of built it up a little bit, at least by then you'll have enough framework to kind of have something to work with. Number 6, your own ideas. Telling you to get ideas from your own ideas sounds silly, but hear me out. This is about taking those random bits and pieces of ideas you've had and combining them or turning them into a full story. I have heard so many people claim that they don't have any story ideas or they can't come up with story ideas. And not to sit here and tell you that you're wrong about your own thoughts, but I just don't buy it. Do you really not have any ideas, or do you not have any fleshed out ideas? Hi, Ripley. I know. You're full of ideas. Your ideas are usually trouble, though. The vast majority of writers don't get fully fleshed out concepts and plots and details just popping into their head out of nowhere. It's just that by the time they're sharing the ideas, they've been fleshed out, and that's what most people are comparing themselves against, and it makes them think that they have no ideas. So many of my ideas at any given point aren't ready to be stories yet. They're vague thoughts and loose concepts. They're maybe just a character or a line of dialogue, a scene, a rough idea I want to play with. Those are still ideas. They're building blocks that you just haven't assembled yet. For this one, I recommend writing down all of your ideas, even if they're not ideas yet. If a snippet pops into your head, jot it down for later. Personally, I keep 2 lists on my phone. One is story ideas, and that's the ones that are a little more fleshed out. They probably have a genre or a vibe, a rough direction. Maybe I know a few characters, a few scenes, things that need to happen in the story. The other one is just called ideas, snippets, etc. And it's just bits and pieces that I have no idea what they're going to become. It can be imagery that I really like and have vague context for, a really clever line of dialogue but without the rest of the conversation, a setting that I want to write but I have no clue of what's actually going to be happening there. Stuff like that. On their own, they're definitely not stories, but they could become part of a story. The trick is to keep adding to your list and not delete things just because they feel weak right now. This also includes ideas you've scrapped, projects you've abandoned, maybe a scene or a subplot you had to remove at some point, darlings you've had to kill. Don't delete them forever, just move them into their own document, because maybe they'll become something someday. I also like to just read through my list every now and then, because sometimes you'll realize that certain snippets share a similar theme and might belong together. Sometimes you'll realize there's something in there that could actually fit with a work in progress you're working on, or maybe you have most of an idea but it's just missing something, and that something might be hidden in one of those documents. And also, just by reading it every now and then, your brain might be working on it in the background, and later on you'll get pieces to just build onto it a little bit more. Right, Ripley? My point is, just because an idea isn't fully formed or didn't work out the first time, don't throw it away. Number 5 is books you've read. Classic advice: if you want to write a lot, you should try to read a lot. Subconsciously absorbing story structure, learning what works and what doesn't, refining your taste maybe. All of that stuff is really helpful as a writer. But aside from the obvious inspiration that a good book might give you, sometimes I get better story ideas from disappointments. There have been so many times that I've really expected to love a book and it just falls flat. Maybe it takes a direction I don't like, maybe elements I was really enjoying get dropped or just not given enough attention. Sometimes the story will start off really amazing, but the ending kind of sucks. And then I think to myself, I really loved this story, it had so much potential, if only the author had done this. Okay then, do it. I'm not necessarily talking about fan fiction, even though that is a great way to get story ideas. And I'm obviously not saying to rip off another author's work and just change the ending. But take the elements you liked, rework into something that's your own, and fix the problems that you had with it. I experience this a lot in mysteries. I love trying to solve the mystery and making guesses along the way as I'm reading. And sometimes my wild theories are really fun, but the story ends up being flat and just kind of okay. And I'll kind of find myself thinking, but what if it had been this out of left field solution? What if it was this wild conspiracy? What if this was actually happening instead? And I love to follow that train of thought and just let my imagination run away a little bit. And by the time I'm done daydreaming, it's a completely different story. And this doesn't have to be mysteries, of course. This can be any story that disappointed you. Maybe you loved the concept and the setup and the character dynamics, but the middle really dragged and you hated the plot twist. So make your own version of the concept. Set it up with the same structure, give your characters a similar dynamic, take the story in a completely different direction, liven up the middle, cut or change the plot twist, rewrite the ending. Maybe you're reading a story and there was a setting that was introduced that you really wanted to explore, but they never really got into it. Use that setting, play around with it, come up with a story that could take place there. Maybe there was a minor character that you loved, but they had a really unsatisfying arc. Throw them into another story, make them a main character, give them the arc that you think they should have had. Obviously, good books can be inspiring too, but spite is a powerful motivator, and sometimes a book that you hate can turn into a project that you're gonna love. Number 4, your other passions and interests. Aside from books and writing, what else do you love? Try to incorporate that into a story. There are obvious ones, like space nerds writing sci-fi, a sports romance about the author's favorite sport, history buffs writing historical fiction, but don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. If you're an animal lover, try to write an animal companion, or a story that takes place at an animal rescue, or a wildlife sanctuary that has your favorite animal. Maybe something involving the animal is the clue that ultimately unravels the mystery, like the dog sniffs out a piece of evidence, or a snake burrows underground and they notice something in the soil. If you love video games, maybe your main character can be a gamer and they can meet someone through a game that's similar to one that you love, and that person can be an ally or the villain. Maybe they find a secret message hidden in the game and that kicks off the mystery. Or maybe they get trapped in the game somehow and they're trying to get free. I feel like it's not uncommon to give your character an interest that you're also into, like making them an artist if you love to draw, making your favorite baseball team also their favorite team, making them a musician who plays your favorite type of music. And that's a great place to start, but why not lean into it? Why not go big and create an entire magic system that's based around art and drawing? Write a murder mystery and set it during the MLB World Series. Maybe there are supervillains and they're corrupting the music wavelengths for their evil plan. And even if you don't want to go that extreme, you can still let that element play a really important role. Think of something that you're passionate about, or a hobby that you want to spend more time looking into, and then see how that could become the center of a story. And don't be afraid to get a little nerdy with it. Get detailed, add Easter eggs, show off your expertise. You're a writer and this is something that you're passionate about. Even if it's kind of niche and not mainstream and obviously marketable, if that's something that you care about, I genuinely believe that you can write it in a way that's accessible for someone who doesn't really have a lot of knowledge going into it, while still having layers and details that somebody who also shares this passion can latch onto and really love. As a reader, I adore when I can feel the author's passion for something and how it just brings those parts of the story to life. And especially when it's something that I'm also passionate about, I will love a book even more than I already would have. Especially if there are references or Easter eggs that I can pick up on. Like, I just feel so cool. And also, writing should be fun. It's okay to be a little self-indulgent sometimes. Number 3 is paranormal investigations. This isn't just for horror stories, and even if you're someone that scares easily and ghost hunting is not your cup of tea, I still recommend reading up on some haunted locations for inspiration. Not only is it fascinating on a paranormal level, but so many of them have rich histories that are just full of stories. I personally love the idea of the paranormal. I definitely believe in ghosts and spirits and just something that's beyond what we currently understand. And some of my favorite content to watch on YouTube is paranormal investigations. And yes, some of them are hoaxes or people lying and exaggerating their reaction for views. Of course they are. But I like the channels that approach it with a genuine curiosity and a focus on the history itself. I don't want to recommend any specific channels because you never know, and I don't want to accidentally endorse somebody who turns out to be a scumbag, but there are plenty of recommendations out there. I love channels that don't overreact or make bold claims. If they get a response or a reading, they theorize and investigate. They don't immediately jump to conclusions. Because that's the thing with paranormal investigations. You're literally just seeing what happens, trying to make connections, and coming up with plausible stories. If they're in a haunted hotel, for example, maybe one of the common ghosts at this location is a woman in white, and then they get a response coming through on the EVP that sounds something like sailor. So maybe this is the ghost woman's husband who was lost at sea and she's waiting for him to return. And then another response comes through that sounds like hallway. So, okay, what happened in the hotel hallway? How does that play into the story? If you are writing a horror, then you can use that to kind of feed into it, like the ghost is in the hallway and they're about to enter the room. Or you can make it a romance and pretend that they're all still alive and she's been waiting for her husband and he's in the hallway and they're about to be reunited. Like I said, I really like the investigations that focus on the history and the real events that happened at these places with these people. A lot of times these events are difficult or tragic, but that makes really good storytelling. And there's always an element of mystery or unknown that makes it really compelling. And there's also just something magical about these people who are long gone and yet not completely forgotten. Even if we don't know all the full details, their lives are inspiring people all these years later, and I just think that's really cool. And like I've said multiple times throughout these entries, the idea is just the starting place. Maybe learning about someone or something is the seed of the idea. The paranormal investigation is connecting the pieces and following the breadcrumbs. You can totally be inspired by these histories and try to stay true to the confirmed facts, and then your eventual story just takes bits and pieces and runs with it. Number 2 is wild what ifs. This one is a ton of fun, but I'll admit that it can be kind of difficult with a completely blank slate because you have to have a rough idea of what to what if about. Sometimes I'll pull from something real and ask what if this happened instead. Like, what if the Titanic didn't sink when it hit the iceberg? What if they were just damaged and adrift? What would the rescue mission have looked like? What would the consequences have been for the survivors? Or sometimes it's something extreme like, what if Mars explodes? How would that happen? How quickly would that affect our planet? What would we do? How would that impact the rest of the solar system? Sometimes I'll do research to come up with a semi-plausible answer, but a lot of times it's just more fun to come up with something completely unhinged for the sake of brainstorming. Maybe if the Titanic was at sea for too long, people would go mad and have to become cannibals to survive. Maybe Mars exploding would cause the Martians to flee and come to Earth and ask for our help to save the solar system from more disaster. And sometimes it's almost more fun if it doesn't make sense. Because then as the author, you get to try to figure out a way on how that could happen. And a lot of times I just keep following the tangents until it gets me somewhere. Like, sure, I don't think the rescuers would take so long to save the Titanic that people would have to become cannibals. But maybe that would happen on a cloaked pirate ship or a top secret submarine. And now what would that story be? Especially as a fantasy writer, I love doing this for world building just to see what I come up with. Like, what if there were no oceans? What if all the land masses were connected and all of the water was underground except for lakes and some rivers? How would the planet have evolved? How would that affect travel and weather and life? Or what if humans could fly? Would it feel as exciting as it seems? Or would it be kind of like running? Just an energy-consuming means of movement that a lot of people don't bother with unless it's for exercise or an emergency. And how would that affect infrastructure? Would we build more vertically just because we can? And what would that mean? And would ladders still exist? And if ladders didn't exist, Would that change anything with life how we know it? Would other creatures be able to fly, or just humans? And if it was just humans, would we build like contraptions and stuff so that our pets could fly in the air with us? Who knows? You could also be a little more serious with your what ifs, especially if you want to write a more serious story. Like, what if the Space Shuttle Challenger hadn't exploded? What if everything had gone according to plan and NASA hadn't taken a nearly 3-year break from space travel? What if the program continued and they didn't make the safety changes that they had to make after Challenger? What if there had been a different disaster? I think it's really interesting to just pick a vague topic that you're kind of curious about and then hone in and what if it until you come up with a compelling story. And my number one recommendation for where to find story ideas: anywhere but AI. If you use AI, I'm not going to bully you right now because I want you to listen to what I'm saying. I want to have a civil conversation so you can understand where the anti-AI crowd is coming from. Setting aside the issues that AI is an environmental terror, there are countless negative effects on the planet and humanity, that generative AI comes from theft, it's immoral and controlled by extreme corruption. I know some people look at that and think that's too big for me to take responsibility for. I just use it for this little thing. But you can stop adding to the problem. It's like voting in an election. You're just one person, but so are the rest of us. And if we all work together, we can make a difference. Even if you're not completely anti-AI, it's called artificial intelligence, not artificial creativity. You have to be the creative one. It doesn't matter if you only use it for part of the writing process, or if you think you're using it as a starting off place and then you're taking over after that. If you're intentionally using it for any part of the process, I want you to stop and reevaluate. Why are you using it? And more importantly, why are you not writing yourself? I hear so many excuses that just don't hold up. I see people saying things like, well, I only use it to make sure that my story makes sense. AI is not going to do a better job than a beta reader. I use it to improve my prose. Read a craft book and practice and hone your own skill. I can't come up with character descriptions on my own. Yes, you can. Of course you can. Writing isn't an inherent skill that people are just born with. And I'm sorry if you were taught that it was and that you just simply weren't good enough. Writing is supposed to take time and effort. It is hard a lot of the time. That's the creative pursuit, to find fulfillment and joy and passion in this thing that you are creating. To connect with readers, to strangers that you might never even meet, but who feel this connection to you because of the words that you wrote on your own. That is magic, and you're cheating yourself of that by using this lie. Whatever excuse you think you have for why you can't write isn't true. Regardless of skill and ability, you can write on your own. Your shortcomings are not unique. My closest writer friend, who is an amazing writer and so creative and so talented, is technically the worst writer I've ever known. He has the worst spelling and grammar of any adult I've ever met. I'm sorry, Tony, you know I love you, but I don't think he's ever used the right there, or there at any point in his life. Sometimes his spelling is so bad I don't have any idea what word he's trying to say. But he has written amazing things and he is so creative. And this is true of published authors too. Like, some of them on their own would suck at parts of the writing process. But you're reading finished products after rounds and rounds of revisions and editing and entire teams working together to make this story as good as it is. There are talented and successful professional authors that also struggle with things like plot holes and flat character arcs, not knowing what direction to take a story, spelling, grammar, all of that stuff. You just don't see it. There are so many resources and real human ways to become a good writer. And as solitary as writing seems, it can really be a group effort. Writing friends bouncing ideas off each other, beta readers giving you feedback and helping you improve your story, agents and editors and professionals working with you to help you with your story once you get to that point. There are groups online, places to connect with people, online communities for writers and support. I'm not going to sit here and say that forming human connections is easier than asking AI, because it's not, but it's okay that it's hard. It's cliche, but you can do hard things. You are capable, and I promise that it's worth it. And also be honest with yourself. If you don't enjoy writing and you don't want to write it yourself, don't write. You don't have to. Pursue another passion. Maybe you love storytelling but hate prose. You can give illustrated stories a try. If you don't like novel structure, try writing a screenplay. Maybe you love writing itself but you hate coming up with ideas. Be a ghostwriter. Write other people's ideas. Or the other way around. Maybe you love coming up with ideas but you hate writing. Hire a ghostwriter. Maybe you don't have the confidence or the motivation to finish a project on your own? Seek out a co-writer. There are so many options. If you have been using AI to write, it's not too late to stop and learn to do better. I genuinely believe in you, and it's not too late to stop adding to the problem. But there you have it. Those are 10 methods to come up with story ideas. Let me know your thoughts or any methods that you like in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button to let me know. And subscribe to stay up to date with the rest of my videos. I post new videos once a week, usually reading or writing related. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!